This is Duke University.
Well, I think I write a little bit about this in the manuscript that I'm working on is the idea of the DJ as a mediator, right? And to sort of do the very play on word, the academic play on words thing. I mean, it's a mediator both in terms of the function that a DJ serves, but also the fact that he or she is using media as a way to mediate that experience, right? I think part of what the challenge, and it's in some ways it's not unlike teaching, is you're trying to figure out how to find the balance between satisfying your audience and what they want to hear, in essence, but as well as sort of trying to push a particular point of view. So in the case of in the club, it's the kind of music or artists and records that I want to play ideally versus what I think I need to play in order to keep the audience happy, and trying to find sort of a middle ground between there. Because if you go too far to sort of pushing your own vision, then you run the risk of losing the crowd, right? And then nobody's happy. On the flip side, if you're simply capitulating to what demands are being made upon you, then you're just serving as a glorified jukebox. And that's not that fun either. I mean, really, you could just get an iPod playlist and it'd be just as good if it's going to be like that. So it's really finding this balance in how am I going to be able to try to throw something new at the listener, right? Or using the classroom analogy, how can I get my students to think about something new that is that they're going to be comfortable with, and that they'll go with me on this journey, with it, as opposed to just essentially giving them what I think that they want to hear, in that sense.
So, what does a recent playlist look like? What were you trying to get your audience to travel with you? Where were they trying to travel with you on Saturday night?
Let's see, what would be sort of the recent playlist? I mean, I've been spinning. I was saying this before we started. I've sort of discovered that salsa's good. It only took me like X amount of years of listening to Latin.
And you need to unpack that for folks.
Yeah. Well, okay. I've been listening, and I've been a real fan of Latin boogaloo music since probably for at least the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I've made, not just as a fan, but it's something that I'm also very much intellectually interested in. And so I've spent a good deal of time interviewing old boogaloo artists and researching the history of boogaloo, which is, we talk about sort of transculturalism, right? Boogaloo is this really fascinating musical moment that brings together sort of these streams of the Afro-Latin and the Afro-American into a single unified music form. Within late 1960s New York City, which is itself is sort of this cultural cultural melting. I don't want to say melting pot, but a cultural meeting point, right?
Precursor to hip hop in some very
in some very interesting ways. But I was so fascinated with boogaloo that it would be natural that salsa would be the next genre to study, because salsa directly comes out of the same labels, the same artists who are part of the boogaloo moment. But because salsa in essence killed boogaloo, I think I had this subconscious, perhaps not that resentment towards salsa for sort of destroying this music form that I was such a fan of, that I kind of consciously went out of my way not to bother to listen to salsa music until much more recently, and have now discovered salsa is really good. I mean, it's a really great, it sounds great, people like to dance to it. And my reasons for sort of avoiding it are in hindsight pretty lame, to be quite honest. So, I think I've been trying to bring in more salsa, and I think actually that's less for the audience's benefit, because salsa is easy. I mean, you can throw a salsa cut in. Anyone who's taken their half-hour lesson thinks that they can do salsa, and that's fine. If it gets them on the dance floor, that makes me happy. But I think I'm actually playing it more for my own benefit, just to listen to this stuff loud and to be able to hear what it sounds like, and to get a better sense of what is it about salsa that works for people, what makes it such an attractive style, and trying to be much more open-minded to that, on a personal level.
We talked a little bit before the session about the democratization of media because of the internet.
Yeah.
And this idea that it's cultural expression, social expression is so much more a democratic process now, because anybody can blog, right? Anybody can have a website. But what gets privileged in this new kind of brave new world is quickness over thoughtfulness. Can you talk about this kind of media business shift that we've clearly seen. The reason why we can nostalgically think about when the Village Voice was the Village Voice.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your work both as a print journalist, but also even in the blogging world, how this kind of shift in the business model around news and information, and particularly cultural criticism, has created real challenges for folks who do the kind of work that we do?
Sure. I mean, how much time you got? I think one of the main things, and this is what you were partially alluding to, has been that print journalism, and I always find this somewhat ironic, that print journalism used to be a space in which long-form journalism and criticism was welcomed, right? That you could read a few thousand words on a single song even in places like the Village Voice or other kinds of publications. But with the rise in the competition that internet sites have brought, a lot of print publications have really cut back on long-form journalism. The Village Voice sort of being the last holdout to that, and even they've gotten rid of their, things that are over 1,000 words are very difficult to find in their pages these days, and they were the last people to hold out. And I would think that because the internet doesn't have physical pages, that you could actually get away with longer pieces on there. But what people have found is that no one likes to scroll, like no one wants to go to that second page. And so in essence, the internet has actually helped to speed along the demise of long-form journalism even faster, in that it all becomes about the capsule review. How many words can you fit within that first, glance of the screen, in essence. And while, as a writer, both academically and as a journalist, I value economy. I value the efficiency of language. There's something to be said about having the space to ruminate, to really think through an idea, and to be able to cover more ground than you can do in a 250-word capsule review. And so I think with the explosion of the internet, it's harmed what writers were able to do, both in terms of financially, because there are fewer places to write, and be able to make a living off of, certainly. But it's not just the lack of writing opportunities writ large, it's also the kind of writing that you can do. I mean, you can still squeeze out a living writing for magazines like, let's say, Blender or Vibe, or newspapers, but you have to be able to think in 400-word thoughts. And again, there's a skill to that. I respect that skill, but it should not be the only form of writing that's valued and that's acceptable within this environment. And I think that's been one of the main things that I've seen change, just really over the last not even 10 years. I mean, really, maybe the last 5 or 6.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.